Hey everyone, today Jesus calls us to childlike faith, whatever that means. People were bringing children to Jesus so that they would bless them. But the disciples scolded them. When Jesus saw this, he grew angry and said to them, "Let the children come to me. Don't forbid them, because God's kingdom belongs to people like these children. I assure you that whoever doesn't welcome God's kingdom like a child will never enter it." Then he hugged the children, laid hands on them, and blessed them. So the typical way I've seen this story used in sermons and other things is choose your favorite aspect of childhood and encourage people to do that, right? Say that's what Jesus wants you to do. And often it idealizes childhood, and I have 2 young children in my home, so I can tell you what kids are actually like and what they're not. Right? I can call out some of the bad answers. I mentioned in one of the previous videos that in the first century, children had a very low status, right? They didn't elevate them the way that we often do today. And so that's probably more what Jesus is thinking about here. It fits their time, and it also fits the context, because Jesus has been talking a lot about not elevating yourself and thinking about your own greatness, but instead to carry the cross. But we can think about all these aspects of childhood, and a helpful way of distinguishing what's useful and what's not is to think about the difference in being childlike and being childish. Because being childlike, as Jesus says, is positive, but there's ways in which we can be childish that I think we don't want to take on. So one of the things I've heard is that, well, kids are always honest, which, they learn to lie pretty quickly. But I think that the sense in which they're not embarrassed to ask certain questions, which sometimes they'll do at very inopportune moments. And along with that, some will say kids aren't ashamed to ask for help or to feel their feelings. Well, kids can be stubborn too and try and do it themselves and make a big mess. And sometimes they feel those feelings a little too strongly, right? Where you have an hour-long experience of them being upset about something that's really minor. But emotional honesty is something that I think we can learn, because that creates intimacy with others. And I can see Jesus looking for that in us. Some will say that kids are very trusting. Again, you think about babies with their mothers, right? That's just instinctual that there's that level of trust there. And sometimes that can go too far, where kids are gullible, and we have to teach them, hey, don't believe everybody. But at the same time, I have plenty of times where I try and convince my kids, trust me, this food is not that bad, or this medicine is good for you, and they still don't believe me all the time. And then finally, people will talk about children having this sense of wonder or awe. My kids like to just sit around and watch screens too, but it is definitely true that my daughter is much more likely to consider the lilies than I might. As frustrating as that can be sometimes on our walks, right? They just notice things that sometimes we don't as adults. There's a paradox here where we all need to grow up and be mature, but a lot of becoming an adult means hiding our true childlike self. And so maybe the message here is, don't be so adultish that you can't trust anyone or trust God, that you can't admit what's really going on in your heart and what you feel, or that you ignore the wonders of God's world. Most of those sort of things, they don't help us get ahead in the world, which is why we don't do them. And that's exactly why Jesus calls us to something else, to have a childlike faith that cares more about wonder and trust than about what it does for us.